Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event today, our Energy Performance Workshop. My name's Karen, and I'm the Head of Business Services for High Group, and I'll be your moderator for today. On that note, if you have any questions, please can you add them to the comments section on the LinkedIn page, and we'll pick them up from there. We'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation, if that's okay, just to keep the flow going. But if you have any more detailed questions about any points that we're raising today, we're very happy to talk to you after the event. So again, just drop us a line in the comments box and we can arrange a call from there. And just to say that we're normally quite used to using Teams for presentations. And this is our first live event on StreamYard, so hopefully no glitches. Anyway, onto our seminar topic for today, which is about optimising renewable energy performance. So I'll start us off with a question. How do you know that your new renewable energy system is delivering the results it was projected to achieve? Well, to answer that question for us, let us introduce our speaker for today, Laura Bishop, co-founder and director of High Group and chair of the Ground Source Heat Pump Association. Laura, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thanks for the intro. Thank you to all those out there in LinkedIn land who have joined us for today for this session. As Karen says, this is the first time we've used LinkedIn Live. So if there is any glitches, I apologise in advance, but hopefully we'll be good to go. The whole purpose of today really is to share something that we've been working on at High Group for about two and a half years now. And it's something we're very excited about. Personally, I've been working in the renewable energy sector for about 15 years, and a lot of the things I see are people who have invested heavily in renewable energy systems, and either they are not performing as expected, or they don't even know actually whether they are doing what they should be doing. So we have come up with a product that helps to optimize the systems and to make sure that they are doing what they should be doing. So purpose of today really is to give you a little presentation about what our energy portal is all about and why we're doing it, present a couple of reports that if you're a client taking advantage of the portal, you would get hold of, and then finishing off with a live demo of what the portal looks like so that you can see what that's all about. So without further ado, I will just share a couple of slides with you. So we've called the webinar about from underperforming to optimised. There has been a lot of chat over years about the energy performance gap, and that's all about what you expected versus what you get when a renewable energy system goes in, whether that's a small solar PV array or a large ground source heat pump. They don't always do what you expected, and sometimes you don't even know if they're doing what they expected. So how can we work on that and make sure that the money invested is doing what it should be doing for you? So if we go all the way back to the why did we do this? Back in 2016, I became really interested in monitoring, reporting and verification, MRV, because of the systems I was seeing that were not performing as they should be. And there's a famous quote, it's attributed to two people. I've attributed it here to Lord Kelvin. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So it's all about, unless you know how something is performing or what it's doing, you can't improve it. So you might feel like you're consuming too much gas, or you might feel like your heat pump is underperforming, but unless you're measuring it, you can't know that, you can't understand it, and you definitely can't improve it. So everything that I'm going to talk about in the next half an hour or so is all based on this philosophy. So again, the why did we do this? What we see all the time, and at High Group we also develop large decarbonisation renewable energy projects, is money's invested up front in any kind of project, whether that's a 2-panel array on a very small house, solar arrays on a house, up to a huge campus-wide decarbonisation project costing £20 million. A payback is established early on, typically in projects, and you will then confirm the carbon reduction from installing your solar PV, installing your battery system, installing your heat pump system. Those then get installed, and typically that's that. The client is left with their system, and the installer goes away and goes on to their next job, and everybody hopes that what's been installed is going to do It's going to give them the payback, and it's going to reduce the carbon. And also it's going to fundamentally work. So what happens after that? And sometimes what we actually find is that there's a bit of a fall off a cliff. The system is left there, and nobody knows whether it's really doing what it should be doing. So a couple of little examples here. As I say at the start, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I just picked three projects that come to mind immediately about where they've had something installed that hasn't quite done what they expected. So the first one on the left hand side there, 500 kilowatt water source heat pump installed, and some people on here might be familiar with the non-domestic renewable heat incentive that finished in 2022. Loads and loads of systems installed over that period of time, big biomass boilers, big heat pump systems, solar thermal systems as well. So this was installed under that scheme. It was a local authority who had it installed. The forecast for this particular heat pump was to generate around £34,000 a year as a minimum revenue off the renewable heat incentive scheme. So that went in about 2019, 2020. As of now, 2025, the local authority has received a single payment of £11,000. That was in 1 year. And there's now 2 years where they haven't been paid at all. And that's because of missing data that cannot be collected properly, or that's being missed. So there's an example. Second example in the middle there, this is a typical one that I see quite a lot, and others on this webinar might see as well. So it's a medium-sized primary school up in the northeast. I went up there to do a feasibility study survey just maybe 2 years ago. When I was there, I spotted several solar arrays, and I thought, oh, brilliant, they've already started on the decarb journey. So speaking to the facilities team, how big are the arrays? What are they doing? Are they generating plenty of power for you? Are they offsetting your electricity bills? The answer was absolutely no idea. Don't even know where the inverter is. Don't know whether they're generating, whether they're on, off, exporting to grids, saving the school money. So somebody somewhere has invested money in these solar panels, expecting them to decarbonise the school and to save money on the bills. But a year on, maybe even 2 months after installation, they're left thinking, what is going on here? We don't know what's happening with these panels. And then the third example there, very recent example, visited a fairly small school, two very large air source heat pumps installed under the public sector decarbonisation scheme round 1. They were commissioned in 2023, so 18 months ago. They have never worked. The school has continued to use gas boilers for that period, and will probably likely continue to use gas boilers. And the reason is, just from a visual, I could see that they were probably very oversized. Heat loss calcs have been done, but they are even then too big for the school. And as a result, the school are having not able to afford their electricity bill, and are worried to switch them on because that'll increase the electricity bill even more. So in all of these, money has been invested, payback established, and carbon emission savings are forecast. And 1 month, 1 year, 5 years after the event, these systems are sitting there not doing what they should be doing. In some cases, they're actually costing the client more money than they should be, and they are definitely not saving any carbon. So this is the why. This is the foundation for what I'm about to talk about. How can we fix this? Because this is not good. This is our money. In a lot of these cases, it's government money. So it's our taxpayers' money being used to decarbonise buildings, which is a brilliant thing to do, and exactly what we should be doing, but they're just not delivering the savings, whether that's cost savings or carbon savings. So what's the problem? If we start at the start, fundamentally, buildings use energy. And whether it's a house or whether it's a large hospital, they use energy. They use gas, they use electricity, they need heat, and they use water as well. And all of those things, typically they're billed monthly. Sometimes they're billed half hourly, but it's typically billed on a monthly basis. Energy itself costs money, and it generates carbon, especially obviously if you're using a fossil fuel boiler, which 85% of buildings in the UK, something like that, are still using. So that's the problem. Or it's not really a problem, it's just a statement. We typically at High Group, and before when I was at Infinitas, when we're asked to do decarbonisation studies, we get sent a load of monthly gas bills. or we might even get an annual bill, and the client will just say, there you go, that's all the information we've got. For us to take a monthly or annual bill and convert that into a properly sized heat pump system or a properly sized solar PV system is virtually impossible. It is fraught with risk in terms of sizing, in terms of costing, in terms of electricity upgrades, those kind of things. So they don't pinpoint, the monthly bills do not pinpoint when and how much energy is being used. So on the right hand side there, you can see a bar chart showing the monthly consumption of gas, in this case, for a particular building over 3 years. So within, let's pick October, there's a blue bar there, say 18,000 kilowatt hours consumed in that month. Is that all being consumed at night? Is it being consumed at the same rate every day? Is some of it being consumed at weekends? We have examples where boilers have been running, identified to be running overnight on a Saturday. Nobody knows why, but if you can get hourly or half hourly data, more granular data rather than monthly data, straight away you can start making savings on when your boilers are running, because they should not be running at midnight unless you're running a hospital, something like that. So interval data, which I'm going to talk about more in a second, shows the usage on a more granular level. And it's more useful, A, to identify when and how energy is being used, as I've just said, but also in terms of sizing systems. And I'll talk a bit more about that during this session. But without interval data, and interval data means usually half-hourly data, which we can sometimes get from electricity, rarely from gas. It's not possible to identify and remove areas of waste. This is before you've even started on installing any kind of renewable system. If you can identify that you are consuming electricity or consuming gas at times when you don't need to be, and you know about that, you can then do something about that. Going back to the very first slide, which said if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. You can't optimize your usage. If you don't know when you're using energy, you can't optimize it. It's just not possible. And again, as I've just said, difficult to start decarbonisation journey as you're not starting with an accurate known baseline. As I've said, converting monthly gas consumption into an hourly profile to accurately size all your systems, a baseline, that is very, very difficult. It's a lot easier with electricity. Just put a little mention about submeters. So most sites might have 1, maybe 2 electricity meters, and I'm talking about commercial systems here. You might want that will, like, say, measure all the electricity for lighting, for power, for switching your computers on, for running ovens. It might be worth looking at submetering specific circuits that might be high consumers and identifying those individually. I've got a good example at the moment, a very large college. They have 1 electricity meter, which is measuring all their imported electricity. They get an electricity bill based on that, and we have half-hourly data. However, it shows that at weekends, when the college is shut, they are still consuming half as much electricity as on a normal weekday. He knows why. So we're working with them now to identify circuits that we can submeter and work out which circuits are being consumed. So are all the chillers working, for example, on a weekend, and nobody knows? It's all that. And again, all about data and informing yourself. And just on the right hand side there, I've got a typical electricity meter and then a bill as well. So that's typically what we get given as High Group to say, there's your information, baseline our gas and electricity consumption, and then let's work on that with decarbonisation. And sometimes I do feel like we have to wave a magic wand in order to get the information that we need. Here we have a system that can now mean get rid of the magic wand and actually get real hard data, hard evidence of existing systems and what the new system could look like, whether that's solar, heat pump, or a biomass boiler, for example. So I'm going to now introduce HIPAA, HIPA. This is the energy portal that we've been working on for the last couple of years. HIPAA stands for Hillside Infinitas Performance Analysis, little e in the middle for the energy side of things, HIPA. And what HIPAA does, it brings together disparate sources of energy data for monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRV. So the disparate sources of energy data might be an EON electricity meter that's measuring all of the imported electricity for a building. It might be a grid gas consumption meter that is also used for billing. It might be a heat meter in an individual plant room that's measuring a heat network coming in and measuring how much heat is coming off that network to that particular building. It might be a solar generation meter. It might be a heat pump electricity meter. All of those different kinds of meters are generating data. It's so precious. And yet it's out there. You might have to walk around site and actually read all the meters yourself individually. You might only be getting some information from your utility provider. You might be getting something through your building management system. But they're all very disparate, and each one has to be read and assessed and analysed individually. What HIPAA does is it brings all of those pieces of data together into one place. So one portal, which I will demonstrate at the end of this, all data in one place. And just that comment at the bottom, monitoring and verifying energy data empowers us to unlock the full potential of efficiency and optimization, both before and after investing in energy saving measures. There's a really important part here. Even if you're not thinking about decarbonising at the moment, or it's something you might do in a year's time or 5 years' time, you should still be considering HIPAA, because what we can do is connect your gas and electricity feeds from your main incomers into HIPAA, start gathering the data, start analysing it, start assessing where are you using energy, where are you using gas, where are you using electricity. Are you using it, half of it at weekends, when actually you've got no requirement to? Let's get that sorted before embarking on a heat pump project, for example. Go back to the school example. Heat pumps massively oversized, really expensive heat pumps, too expensive to run for the school. And that's mainly because they had to upgrade their electricity supply to such a degree that is not actually required at all. And it's increased their standing charge by 10 times on their bill because of this big energy cable, when actually if they'd have just understood their heat demand better, in reality, they might have been able to get away with a smaller heat pump, smaller electrical cable, and everything else that goes with that. So what is energy data monitoring, reporting and verification, MRV? It tracks energy, continuous monitoring of the energy consumption patterns in a particular building. We then verify that. We validate that data. Is it accurate? Is it complete? So when it arrives, we do some data cleanup, we check it, we make sure that it is as expected. Is it the wrong order of magnitude? Is it looking at peak demand in the middle of the night rather than the middle of the day? So we do all of that cleanup and verification of the data that's coming in. We then provide some analytical insights. So what does the energy tell us? Okay, you might log into E.ON's gas energy portal. You might have access to that, but you've got to log in and have a look at it yourself and think, well, what does that tell me? It tells me that I'm just using gas. What does it actually mean? Whereas at High Group, we actually do the insights for you and tell you what that means. And then that enables us, all that information enables us then to optimize that usage, so we can identify those opportunities, that weekend operation, that overnight gas boiler running, that running through school holidays, or chillers running when it's the middle of winter and not being required. Those kind of things, we can optimize all that usage. So it's a systematic approach to measure data, to analyze data, and to optimize your systems for improved efficiency and cost savings. Going back to that energy gap, the performance gap, sorry, it's closing that gap, bringing back together what you expected something to do to what it's actually doing, and actually closing that loop. So that's what MRV is about. So when I was actually thinking about this a couple of days ago, I got a Fitbit about 2 years ago, and I thought actually HIPAA is a bit like a Fitbit but for energy. So when you're wearing your Fitbit, what it does is it provides you data on your health and your well-being. And then you can use that data to make changes in your own personal life. So you might, for example, I felt that I may not be getting enough sleep, but I felt I was getting enough exercise. So with my Fitbit now, it can tell me precisely how many steps I've done every day. It can then notify me, and I can think, oh, I've only done 8,000 steps for today. I need to go out and do a walk. Or you've not done any relaxation today. You've not drank enough water today. It's telling you all this information, and you can then go and do something about it, and that's improving your health. So HIPAA is exactly like a Fitbit, but for your energy. It's telling you something, which means you can then go and do something about it. So back to HIPAA, away from Fitbits. And so the HIPAA is the center for all the data, and you can see the kind of information we can push into HIPAA. So you've got your gas meters, you've got electricity meters, which are both incoming electricity and solar generation meters. You can have an export meter in there. You can have heat demand on particular plant rooms. Even if you have 30 plant rooms on a site, you can get a heat meter in or use an existing heat meter. All of that data, kilowatt hours generated, can come into HIPAA. Your gas boilers. So if you've got one gas meter but 15 gas boilers, we can get clamp on heat meters, or we can actually install heat meters, inflow heat meters, and get that data pinging into HIPAA so that we know precisely what each gas boiler is doing, rather than just understanding what the whole site is doing in terms of gas consumption. Critically for heat pumps, because we want them to be running efficiently, because they can be expensive to run, we can then monitor heat pump consumption. So it's your electricity consumption going into your heat pump and your heat generation from your heat pump. And we can also then calculate the COP, coefficient of performance of a heat pump, using the data, and we can do that automatically within the portal. So that's a bit about HIPAA. That is what we've been doing for 2.5 years. I'm going to show you a case study of one of our clients that's been with us on that journey. But if you're just thinking, well, what's the process here? I potentially could be interested in HIPAA. What does it mean? What would you need to do next? So it's a very simple process we've got in place. We would come down and survey what meters you've got. It doesn't matter whether you're right at the start of the decarb journey and you've only got gas and electric. We can come down and survey those meters. I've been on site today just to do exactly that, gas and electric. And actually, I haven't mentioned water a lot, but we can also do water. We can then make sure that we specify a system that can either get some data loggers installed, or we can access data from your utility supplier. We take all of that on board. We'll also identify if there's additional meters needed, and we can get those specified and installed. We collect the data, so we make sure that all of those meters are then pushing their data into our portal. We then baseline that consumption, whether it's baselining your gas on a half-hourly basis, or it's baselining your electricity. That can be really useful for things like your scope 1 and 2 emission footprints, your carbon footprints at the start of a project. We will do the analysis of that data, quantify any energy savings, the performance metrics around there. Critically, we then report to you. So we don't rely on you coming and having a look at the data, although you can obviously come into your own portal and have a look at the data. We actively report that out to you, and we can either just report to you, or we can report and we can advise as well. And I've got a bit more on that at the end of this pack of slides. And then we do continuous monitoring of that. So it's not just a one-off. It just goes on and on and on. As I say, this one particular client, they've been with us for 2 years, and we continue to work with them to continue to identify areas for optimization. So this is our case study. We have been working with Gloucestershire College. They have very kindly allowed us to talk a little bit about their project, particularly because they're very proud of it, and rightly so. It was a PSDS project. We've got ground source heat pumps operating at 2 sites, 400 kilowatts at both sites, about 800 kilowatts solar on each site, a 1 megawatt hour battery on each site, controls upgrades. Various plant rooms, they've retained some gas boilers, we've changed some of their hot water systems. So it's quite a rounded project. And that project has got maybe 5-6 heat meters on each site. We've got several electricity meters with data coming in. So we have got all those meters, some of which we specified, some of them were there already. We actually baselined the project before we started back in about 2020, I think it was. And then we've been metering it ever since post decarbonisation. We provide them an energy audit report, which I'll show an example of after this. So that just talks about how they've been using energy, how much they've generated, that compares it with the forecast. And really importantly, it highlights the areas for optimisation, troubleshooting. They have access into our dashboard. You can just see that on the right-hand side, and it's all cloud-based monitoring. So all that data is coming through into the cloud and then into our dashboard, and they have full access into the dashboard. So as well as us reporting to them, they can come and have a look anytime at all that data. So the key outcomes from this last couple of years of monitoring is we can report on the actual performance of the solar array, of the heat pump, of the gas boilers. So ideally, we don't want gas boilers running. We want heat pump running as much as possible. We have identified times when the gas boilers have been running and the heat pumps off. Well, that shouldn't happen. But if we weren't monitoring it, we wouldn't know. We've actually been able to address that and fix it. We can look at it in terms of kilowatt hours, energy. We can look at it in terms of cost, and we can look at it in terms of carbon. It's very easy to look at those three different things in our portal. And as I say, the client has full data visibility via the HIPAA portal. So optimization troubleshooting, a couple of examples. We've got these 800 kilowatt solar arrays on the roof. We noticed that one particular month we were reporting solar generation was decreased quite substantially. So we can check that against actual solar irradiation and say, well, actually, was there a lot of cloud? So therefore, the generation would naturally be lower. That wasn't the case. Go to site, find out that the inverters, there's an actual fault on a couple of the inverters. Get the inverters replaced, get them back up and running. And then again, we're back up monitoring again. We're always monitoring anyway. And we can see that just the effect of replacing those two inverters has had, and we're back up to where we should be and predicted solar generation. So that's very, very important, because if we hadn't been monitoring, no one would have known that the inverter had failed and the solar would have continued to have underperformed. Another example, I've talked about this one actually already, gas consumption exceeding forecast. So monthly, again, reporting, why are the gas boilers operating? Why is the gas consumption higher than we forecast? And the reason was that there was a temperature set point within the control system preventing the heat pumps coming on. So it's a setback. So the gas boilers were thinking, oh, heat pumps are not running. We need to come on because that's the way it's controlled to be. If the heat pumps fail, the gas boilers take over. But the heat pumps were not coming on because they were seeing too high, I think, a set point, or too low a set point. So we just changed the set point. That enables heat pump operation to come back on track, and the gas consumption reduced accordingly. Again, data. If we didn't know that, if we didn't have the data, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So that's why it's just been so important. Just a point at the bottom, the interval data enables the correct heat pump and solar sizing at the start of any project. Hence why, if you're considering starting on a decarb project, this is the time to get some gas and electric data coming into the portal so that we can analyse that for you and make sure that your systems are not oversized. We see heat pump systems oversized all the time. I don't know whether it's a de-risking thing, but basically, if you've got the right data, you can make sure that you're as accurate as possible, and that removes all your cost and, well, not all of it, but some of the cost and operational risk in decarbonisation projects right at the start before you've spent any money. So these are just examples, some typical monthly reporting. It shows generation of energy, it shows consumption of energy against the forecast with some narrative on the findings. So, you know, you get some real insight into how the systems are performing and what you can do about it. So we are reporting on the left-hand side, actual gas consumed versus what we forecast at the beginning of the project. Ground source heat pump generation forecast against what we forecast. And of course, weather's going to play a part in this. If it's a particularly warm month, will be generating less energy. But if your heat pump is still running flat out and it's a warm month, that again is an area to investigate, because that's costing you money. And then carbon footprint, this is what it's all about. You know, are we reducing the carbon footprint and getting the decarbonisation that we expected? And then just very briefly, before I flick onto the actual live demo, the further opportunities here. So High Group has some different service levels using the HIPAA portal. The cheapest way of using HIPAA is the passive scheme, which is just about monitoring and reporting on a monthly basis. It's nice and cheap to do, but the cost benefit is the minimal, because it's up to you then to decide what you want to do with that information. The active is a little bit more expensive, but it does give you that information. There's some discrepancies here. Your inverters are underperforming, your heat pump COP is dropping off. So we can flag that, which means that the cost benefit is a bit more to you because you're able to do something about that. We've got the dynamic, where we then take on the fixing of whatever the problem is. So we will do further investigations into why your heat pump COP is reducing. And we can also look at market integration. So if you've got things like thermal stores and batteries and heat pumps, we can look at getting that integrated into the markets and making some more money for you, more revenue streams, which then leads into the Dynamic Plus, which is sort of the pinnacle, the platinum offering, I guess, of this, which is where we can really drill down into when are you using electricity? Can you use different time of use tariffs? Can you use battery storage for aggregation, revenue, solar sponge, well, more than solar sponging, sorry. It's all about making that available out to the grid and enabling more money to be made for your system that you've already got in place. The data in HIPAA enables that really easily. But the cost for this project, for this product, for each site is very much tailored to what you've got. So the cost of doing a small solar array with a small heat pump will be very different to a site with 15 plant rooms, 15 gas boilers and 2 ground source heat pumps, for example. So it's all very bespoke, and we're very happy to talk to anybody about what they've got, large and small. There is no minimum size of system. If you've got 1 gas meter and 1 electric meter and you just want to know what's going on, that's well within our scope. So I am just going to flick over to a couple of reports very quickly. So just an example of a typical monthly report that a client would produce. This has just been anonymized. So this is from March last year. First of all, we talk about the carbon footprint. You can see that top graph there. The 2017 number was the baseline right at the start, and then in we can see there 2024 and predicted for 2025 carbon footprint. So you can see that from the data we can absolutely confirm that we have reduced their carbon footprint down to 38% of what it was at 2017. You can see there what's going on with the grid electricity. So you can see here monthly, but the portal allows us to look at it hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, annual. And what we're showing there is the business as usual case right at the bottom table there. So that's pre-decarbonisation, the forecast that we made at the start of the project, and then what's actually happening. And we can say what's the variance to that. And if it's very different, we always expect it to be slightly different because we're very much dictated to by weather, if it's very warm, if it's very cold, if it's very sunny, if it's very cloudy. But if it's significantly different, this is where we can start to flag and say we've noticed there's a problem here. We need to do something about that. Same with gas. So we've got, our prediction, what's actually happening, and the blue line there is where we were at the start. So this one, we can see we have massively impacted the gas consumption at site. But in January, February, March, we can see that there's too much gas being consumed, and that was due to a set point issue with the heat pumps. Solar production, again, what did we forecast? What have we actually done, taking into account cloudiness or sunniness? And if there's a variance to the forecast, do we therefore need to look into this in more detail? And we can also compare that with real life weather data. Heat pump production, again, what did we forecast right at the start of the project, what we're actually doing? And really importantly, at the bottom there, we are able to, within the portal, is take the real life electricity data, consumption of the heat pump, the real life heat pump generation data for heat, and divide one by the other basically, and we get a live ongoing COP, coefficient of performance, and we can compare that with our forecast. And I'm glad to say that on the whole, some of our projects are overperforming in terms of efficiency, which is brilliant. And then we just have a couple of little comments at the end. This is just on passive, so we don't go into great detail. But if I just show you the annual report that we do for this particular client, very similar kinds of things. But the year 2 summary shows that we started with 1,190 tonnes of CO2 right at the start of the project. We're now at 357 tonnes of CO2, and we can see as well the summarised solar, gas, electricity and heat pump generation. And the reason I'm showing you this is more to do with the impact on cost. Obviously, we all want to save carbon, but ultimately this has also got to save money if possible. Doing what we have been doing here in terms of battery storage and aggregation and running the solar at the right time and making sure that not too much is going out to grid, or making sure that when it does go to grid it's at the right time, we're actually enabling this particular client to save about £350,000 a year, about £100,000 free cash, and that is with big heat pumps, big solar, big battery, big capex, but we are enabling them to do this, and we can tell them absolutely this is what's happening because we have the data. It's just so important to have the data. And now very quickly, because I don't want to spend the whole time talking, I'm just going to give you a very, very quick demonstration of what the HIPAA portal looks like. So if you give me a second to share my screen, make sure I'm sharing the right one. Is this one? So this is our HIPAA portal. So if you were a client and you had signed up, this is exactly what you'd see when you come into the portal. You would see on the left-hand side your organisation, which at the moment is called Demo.org. And underneath that, you'd see all of your sites. So if you just had one site, you'd see that. But if you had 5 sites, you would see all of them. And underneath each of these is the meters or sensors that we have got going in on this particular site. So here, what are we measuring? We're measuring the battery. We're seeing how much solar energy is coming into the battery and how much of that energy is going back out to the buildings. We've got meters on the domestic hot water, which is being powered or heated by the ground source heat pumps. We have got heat meters on our gas boilers. So how much are the gas boilers actually generating? The answer should be 0. It's not always the case. We have grid electricity that's coming from the utility. We've got grid gas that's coming from the utility. We have a formula in there for heat pump COP, coefficient of performance. We know exactly how much electricity the heat pump is consuming. We know how much heat the heat pump is generating, and we know how much solar is being generated. And we could have 15 solar generation meters in here. There's no limit to how many meters we can have. But if I just give you an example, so solar generation, we have got all the way back to 2023. We can look at it in terms of a daily profile. So that's 12th of February, 2025. We can have a look at it. Let's pick on the 9th. We know it's been quite sunny recently. So we can see what's been going on during the day in terms of solar generation. We can have a look at that on a monthly basis. So we can see this is daily during April. So actually that gives you an idea of how it's become more sunny during April. And we can also have a look at it on a yearly basis. So at the moment, we're only halfway through April, of course, but March, you can really see that we've got a lot of solar generation. And in 2024, you can see typically what's going on. You expect to have a lot more solar generation during June. You can see here the impact of inverters failing. So that's the impact on there. We can also compare that. So we can do a comparison of 2025 to 2024. We can see, are things better or worse? Is it better in 2023? So the systems haven't been up and running that long, but we can compare that, and we can compare as well on monthly, and we can compare annually, we can compare daily. So we just come off solar, go on to something like grid electricity. Again, exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to switch the comparables. So we can have a look at when electricity is being consumed. We can have a look at it. This is February 2025. You can see obvious weekends, reduced consumption. You can have a look at it on daily and what's going on. Why is it that the electricity consumption is increasing at around 4 o'clock? Is it because there's solar being generated? Yes, there is. So you can see that the solar generation is there in the middle, and that's actually having a big impact on electricity consumption. And if you compared that to a year where you didn't have solar, which is the baselining, you'd actually be able to see the reality, the impact that solar is having on your electricity consumption. If we just have a look at the heat pump for a minute. So we've got the heat pump electrical consumption, and we have the heat pump heat meter. This is a day in February. I'm going to have a look at it on a weekly basis. This is what we really, really want to see. We want to see the heat pump consuming a lot less electricity than heat being generated. And we can have a look at the COP as a result of that. So COP, we're looking at 3.25. This is very good. This is an existing build, remember. But if we look at something like week 9, so this is in February, still very good COPs. If we look at it, December, very good. So this is where we can see, well, there's a drop off here. So if we wanted to, we could then go and look at, well, why is the COP dropping off on that particular day? What's happening on that day? And we can interrogate, when was the heat pump working? When were we consuming gas, for example? So why are we on this particular day, no gas consumed, on this day, gas consumed? It might be completely explainable, but without the data, you can't really get to grips with what that's all about. What I do just want to say very quickly before I stop talking, if I just go back to month, we can very quickly here, this is exactly what you can see. As long as we've put in your unit cost of, say, gas and electricity, and we've put in the correct CO2 carbon emission factor for each of these types of fuel, you can flick very easily between cost. So if you just see there, this in February, the cost of gas, £3,366, and we can have a look at how much carbon was generated. So 8,800 kilograms of CO2 just from gas consumption, and we can do that for the electricity as well. So 22,000 kilograms of CO2 and the cost of electricity around £29,000 in February. And we can go back 2024. And if your unit costs change, we can just update this to reflect that. So that is that's the portal, and there's a whole lot more we can do with it, but of course this is just a very quick demo. I have talked an awful lot, my mouth feels very dry, so now I am going to hand back to Karen to see if there's any questions, and please do feel free to ask anything.
Hello again. Hi. Right, Laura, we do have some questions actually. First one's from Alex, and it's about verifying heat pump COPs. He's asking, some heat pumps can calculate and display the heat pump COP on their integral display controller. Have you found that this differs from COPs obtained from installing third-party heat and power meters?
Okay, well, first of all, we could, if that is a heat pump that has that capability, we could have a look at extracting that as a data point and putting that into as an alternative to putting heat and electric meters on. The only thing I'd say is I haven't actually done a check of what a heat pump would say versus what an electric and heat meter would say, because if you've got an electricity meter and a heat meter, I would always start there. If you think back to the Renewable Heat Incentive Scheme, that's exactly what Ofgem asked for. So it's an independent heat meter that measures precisely what heat's being generated with an independent electricity meter. I would always say to start there rather than use what the heat pump is telling you. If you want to double check, you'd need both on there. I haven't come across a system, to be honest, where both have been available, where it's been on the heat pump and it's been on the heat meter and electricity meter. So the answer to the question is, I don't know the answer. But I would say having an independent heat meter and electric meter is probably the most accurate thing to have on there, especially given that that's Ofgem's preferred way of measuring.
Lovely, thank you, Laura. Alex, hope that answered your question. Got another great question in just recently as well. How long should you have the MRV system in place before you can start to take action on implementing changes? 1 month, 3 months? How long do you think?
It depends what you're measuring. So if you're measuring gas consumption in boilers in the middle of summer, then you probably want to wait over winter. You'd need at least 1 winter period for that. And if you want to know how your heat pumps are operating, again, if they're only doing heating, I'd say you need a winter period. So maybe if you had a cold snap, you could potentially have a look at that over a period of 1 week. What I will say is one of our clients has recently connected their electricity up to our system. They don't have any renewables installed at the moment. Within 1 week, we were able to spot that they had some very funny, anomalous things happening at times when they were not expecting. So within a week, sometimes you can see the impact. But the ideal from an engineering point of view is 1 year of data. But again, it just depends on what you're trying to assess.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you, Andy, for that question. I've also got a question has come in. What is the size of site that you would recommend would have an MRV? Is there any sort of size? It's small, big, medium?
I think it comes down to the cost. So obviously there is going to be a cost associated with connecting the system into HIPAA. It's not a massive cost, but there is a cost. We have one particular client at the moment who just has a small ground source heat pump and a small solar array. They have 2 heat meters on the heat pump and they have 1 electricity meter on the heat pump. So it was a renewable heat incentive scheme. They have a desire to connect up to MRV, just personal desire, and they're willing to spend the money to do that. They think it might help with they think they have got serious performance issues, which is causing them a high electricity bill. So I would actually say there's no minimum size of system, but obviously there probably is a bit of a cost benefit analysis. However, if you've got a heat pump installed and you're maybe paying 26 pence for electricity, and that is only getting a COP of 1, regardless of whether it's a 10 kilowatt heat pump or a 1 megawatt heat pump, that is going to be costing you a lot of money. So the savings you could make by assessing this on a more granular basis may be worth investing in getting connected onto HIPAA. And as I say, we're not talking tens of thousands of pounds here, but it could save you quite a lot of money, especially on the electricity side of things. So there is no minimum size. We would be happy to look at any system size and give you a ballpark figure, and then you can think, well, actually, for the size of my site, it's probably not worth it. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, generally there is no minimum size.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. And another great question has come in. How could you optimize spare energy production? What happens, especially with batteries and solar sponging? You'll have excess energy at certain points. Is there a way to actually market that?
There is potentially an option to do that. So we have quite a few clients now who have had batteries, 1 megawatt batteries installed as part of their big heat pump systems. Ordinarily, if you had a solar system and you had consumed everything that solar was generating, you didn't have a battery, that would then go off site and you'd just be getting some kind of smart export guarantee, which could be as little as 3 pence a kilowatt hour. It could be as much as 15 pence a kilowatt hour, depending on your tariff, but it's not an awful lot when you compare it to your electricity import price. If you have a battery, that can be sized to ensure that you don't export if you don't want to, so you're using 100% of all the electricity you are generating, so therefore you are saving your 26 pence import price and avoiding your 13 pence export price, which is just not worth it on the whole. But if you do have a battery, I did talk about it a little tiny bit in the slides. If you do have a battery, you can make that available to the grid. So when there's times of stress on the grid, let's take the World Cup, where everybody goes at half time and makes a cup of tea or does something else that requires electricity, the national grid have to be prepared for that, and they usually have a load of gas turbines spinning reserve just to take up that slack. But if you have a heat pump that could be turned off for 15 minutes and you've got a thermal store, or if you've got a battery that could potentially export to grid for 15 minutes, that can relieve the stress on the grid by turning big electrical items off or by allowing your battery to discharge. That the national grid will pay you for that ability to access your equipment and utilize that electricity to relieve the pressure on the grid. So that is those batteries can be aggregated. High Group has recently partnered with a company called Grid Beyond, who do exactly this. So if you do have batteries, if you do have large heat pumps, chillers, thermal stores, we could look at, as part of that Dynamic Plus I talked about, look at getting you into those markets, which would generate cash just from the fact that you've got that equipment there already. We don't need to come and install that for you. If you've already got that kit in, we can come and look at A, getting it connected to HIPAA, so we understand what you're doing when with your energy, and B, enabling you to export electricity onto the grid or to switch your own equipment off, and then you can get some revenue benefit from doing that.
Great, thank you very much. And another question coming from Christian. He's asking, do you find it easier to work with existing meters on site and use their data outputs, or is it generally more effective to replace them with new meters altogether? What data collection outputs work with the HIPAA platform?
Okay. Yes, so it all depends on the meter. So if you're talking about utility meters, it's costly and takes quite a lot of time to get meters switched out. So we tend to, it's a lot easier if they've already got a data logger in place, for example, sending out pings from the gas meter or from the electricity meter. Electricity meters always tend to have their own data loggers in, because they have to be of over a certain size, they have to be enabled to do that for half-hourly reading. We can access the data that's coming in off the data logger and pull that into our portal. If we don't have that on the utility meters, we can sort that out. We can arrange for data loggers to be fitted. So that's the utility meters pretty much leave them because we don't really want to be touching them, because legally we, High Group, can't do that. We'd have to get in touch with the utility providers, which is always a difficulty. If there's existing meters, for example, heat meters and solar generation meters that are pinging, that are sending data into a BMS, that's really easy. We can deal with that very easily by putting a module onto the BMS, like a virtual module onto the BMS, which then extracts the data. So if you've got a heat meter that's talking Modbus to BMS, we can take that data. If you have a heat meter that doesn't have BMS, like the client I was talking about with small heat pump, 2 heat meters, 1 electric meter, we can amend those meters or just supplement those meters with a data logger, a SIM card box, which will then ping the data out that way. So providing they are, say, Modbus or MBus enabled, we should be able to access the data. If they're not, and we can come and survey this, we can then recommend replacing meters. But on the whole, we prefer to use what you've got because it saves you money. But if we fundamentally can't, because they can't talk, they've got no communication capability, we can sort that out. But if it's just a cost, but we will be very clear with you what the costs of the hardware are, the replacement costs, as well as the connection into HIPAA. If there's any more questions on that, then do feel free to drop us a line, because it just totally depends on what meter you've got and what it's metering.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just a quick check, in case anybody's got any more questions out there, drop us a line in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll just pop up a quick slide here. Say thank you very much for attending. Thank you for all your questions. I mean, so pertinent, very on the money. A lot of you might have more in-depth questions you might want to ask. Please do get in contact, and maybe just book a one-to-one with us, and we can go through all of your queries and specifics for your particular site. So thank you very much, people, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.